support group. If you've been following on our adventures for the last several months, this is now maybe month number 5, wrapping up. We've been doing these shows, Dare Greatly, twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, almost every week for the last 5 or 6 months. As you know, we usually use this tool as a live capture process, and then once we capture it and share it with our communities, then it takes about a week and a half, 2 weeks or so for it to turn into a Spotify channel. So definitely take a look at that. We just got some new ones posted. I think we're up to maybe 11 posted on Spotify now, so definitely check out that channel. I'll post a link here in a moment. I think some of you know that we're starting a brand new project with the Space Frontier Foundation. We're going to start collecting data on what they're calling the Pioneers series. That name might change. But for now, it's called the Pioneers series. The Space Frontier Foundation's been in business for 35 years. This is their anniversary. And so what they've decided to do is go back and look at the first 10 years, from 1988 to 1998. And that really did set the stage for where we are now in the commercial sector, a thriving cislunar ionosphere. But if you go back to 1988, I was 2 years out of high school in the United States Marine Corps. So that was a while ago. But in 1988, the idea of a commercially focused space enterprise, and I don't mean like Star Trek, I mean like an enterprise of space companies, that was straight up science fiction, right? So really happy to start working with the Space Frontier Foundation. We will start airing those. I don't want to give any hard dates, but it's going to be sometime in the next 3 weeks or so. We're going to start hosting them. It won't be live like this is live, but we'll start hosting them on Tuesdays in this same time block. So Monday and Wednesday, 5 o'clock West Coast time for our show, Dare Greatly. And then Tuesdays, once a month, it's going to be the Mars Society's Red Planet Live. That's tomorrow, by the way. They have some tremendous guests coming up. I'm really excited about the Red Planet Live series. So on our Tuesday schedule, once a month, it's going to be live with Red Planet Live, Mars Society, and then 3 times a month, we'll be showcasing the raw capture process of the Pioneers Project for Space Frontier Foundation. So that's going to be 3 shows a week, every week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So pretty excited to see our network, our channels grow. So that's pretty fun to watch. So definitely join us. Should be a good time. With that, the last piece of news is locally in the Seattle region, we are a finalist in a local accelerator. So we're going to do a pitch in a couple days. So that's pretty exciting, just to kind of see the business beginning to kind of get some legs under it. Candidly, the folks involved don't know anything about space, so I think our chances of actually coming away with any sort of prize is pretty remote, but still, the process is worth the effort, so it's pretty fun to be a part of. And then the last thing to share is our beloved intern from Korea, Yujin Kim. She just left on, I got up at 3:30 in the morning to get her to the airport on Saturday, so she's still in the States for a little while longer, but she'll be heading back to Seoul here pretty soon. She is our 7th interns, sponsored by the State Department and the Ministry of Education in Korea. So always great to have these students from the WESTI program involved. She gave her final presentation on Thursday. All of our interns do an individual project. She knocked it out of the park. We decided to record it. So we'll post that on the show either Monday or Wednesday next week, probably. So if you want a really good understanding of, a cross-section of the rocketry business and a survey of 15 rocketry companies and 23 rockets, pretty amazing stuff actually for an undergrad level product. So pretty impressed. Anyway, okay. With that, we're gonna bring in our guest. Give me a second here.
Hello.
Hi, I'm happy to welcome you, Jyotsna Budideti.
That's right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. As folks that watch the show a lot, I often know most of our guests really well. In some cases, I've been to their weddings. In some cases, I'm beer drinking friends with them. And in other cases, like this, our staff reporter, Rachel Brooks, was at an event at an MIT maybe 6 weeks ago or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And that's how she met you, but I don't actually know very much about you. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your story, trying to understand like where you fit in this new $500 billion space economy. So do me a favor, let's go. One of the things we do around here is we go into people's origin stories. So what is your origin story? If you were a mythic comic book character, how did you get here? What's your background? And then we'll talk more about SpaceSense in a minute.
Absolutely. My origin story is very cliche in the sense that, well, everyone asks you, what do you want to do growing up? And I don't know, for some reason, I was fascinated with airplanes, aircrafts, and I said, I want to be a pilot. And it was very clear for me that it has to be a fighter pilot. There's no helicopter pilot, no commercial pilot, nothing else. Has to be a fighter pilot. And my dad was in the Army, so even better.
My dad was in the Army as a helicopter pilot, so I get the need to fly.
Yeah, so I had pretty good access to those. I mean, not that I flew them, but I would see them every day flying. But then as I grew up, I couldn't because, well, the only way was to be part of the Air Force, and I had correction in my eye, so that wouldn't fly. So, well, so I was pretty disappointed, but then I thought, okay, what's the next best thing? There's nothing I can do about it, so what else can I do? So I said, okay, fine, I'm going to learn how to make them, how to build them. And I said, okay, fine, that's what I'm going to do. And again, for a bachelor's in my engineering, I said, that is the only thing I want to do. I just wanted to learn how to build these planes. So I ended up taking an aerospace engineering program. There was very few schools in India. I was studying there. So there were very few schools that offered that and ones that had a decent program. And I ended up going to my college, Manipal Institute of Technology. That's where I studied my engineering, learning not just about planes, helicopters, but also space. I think I wasn't that fascinated about space at the get-go, but I had this really interesting course study on orbital mechanics, and there was a book on orbital mechanics. It's really old, 50s. I forget the name of the author now. It's a very, very old book from the 50s. And the way they wrote the orbital mechanics book felt less like a scholarly book, but more like somebody who's so passionate about it is discovering it and then explaining their process of the discovery. And that really stuck with me, and I was fascinated. But yeah, that was my origin story. Ended up doing my master's, but then at the time of master's, I was still at the fence. I wasn't really fully focused in space. I knew I loved technology. I loved building things with technology. I was part of, with NASA and Society of Automotive Engineers. They have competitions about flying microplanes.
Yeah.
So I was part of that. So I did everything, all those kind of stuff in college. And so I knew I wanted to do something technology, but I wanted something more, something that had some sort of societal impact. I knew I didn't have the patience to wait 20, 30 years to get things into people's hands. I wanted more, I guess it's the generation, I guess, more instant gratification. So I knew I wanted to build things from technology, learn more, but get it into people's hands, see how it is actually helping them.
Right.
And a really an internship that really stuck to me was this internship at a nonprofit, nothing to do with aerospace, but I used my thermodynamics to then build biomass stubs. Nothing to do with aerospace, but I was using the same thermodynamics principles to build a biomass stove for people who didn't have access to decent stoves, and they had stoves at home that was actually causing them lung problems.
I have heard this biomass stove story about 4 times from 4 vastly different people. It's kind of amazing. Let's dig into that for a second
Yeah,
because if I understand it right, correct me. There's a lot of people in the world that are using stoves in various huts and villages around the world. Uh, and it's the primary cooking tool. It's the lighting
right.
tool. It's pretty hard to read by stove light, so it's hard to get an education that way. It's bad for your lungs. You get shot
That's right.
with asthma. So let's dig into that for a second longer, only because I think it's fascinating and it impacts so many people. So what's your part in that story?
Yeah, so for me, I had just finished 1 year of my engineering and I was looking for summer internships. No one would hire me. They were the only people that gave me a job. So I took it, and they said, we have something that is not scalable at the moment. Somebody has to be trained to go to everyone's house to actually build something so that people don't have these lung diseases, to have a more sustainable way for them, but also more healthy way to cook. So my whole job for the summer was to come up with a new product that was completely off the shelf and modular, something this company could just sell by
Okay.
anybody. So that was the point. It was my intro into user-centered design, my intro into applying technology, but thinking about an end user and thinking about how they would use it, and then trying to deal with the practical aspect of it. So
Hmm.
I couldn't use the best state of art materials. People wouldn't pay for it. I mean, it doesn't work. So I had to make practical compromises, I guess, but also make sure it works. And 3, 4 years later, I reached back to them. I was in touch with them, and they are like, the design I built over the summer, they tried to give it to somebody to make it more efficient and blah, blah, blah. But at the end, they ended up using the same design and then really scaling it. And it was so good that it was it was given away across different rural cities, rural towns
Yeah.
in south of India, and it was pretty much for free for the user because it was fully funded by different agencies. So that really stuck with me. And there are videos on YouTube from the same company where people are using that stuff and talking about their experience. That for me was like, oh my God, this is something that really hit the spot. Man, this is all I want to do. How can I use my passion for technology but change people's lives?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing lever that can change the whole world if you've got the right tools. So amazing. That's cool. How old were you when you did that?
Um, 19, 20 maybe.
So imagine if more people had a chance to have an just that spark of imagination and the talent that goes with it to build something that really makes an impact on the people that are using it. So good for you. That's a heck of a way to get started. Good. That's neat. Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really the beginning for me to say, okay, this is what I want to do, learn more about technology, get better at it, but then focus on how to get it to people's hands. That was the thought process that got me to a program between Berkeley, where you are, and another school in France called École Polytechnique. It was a dual program between them. I had to fully fund it myself, so I couldn't really handle the entire UC Berkeley program. So it was a dual program that I could handle. And that was the best experience I had, where I kept working with machine learning, AI, learned more about it from one of the best people in the world. At the same time, learned about, actually not just learn, but actually practice while learning about how to get it out of the lab to people. So that was kind of my intro into entrepreneurship in some form.
And that wasn't an entrepreneurship program, right?
It was an entrepreneurship program.
It was. Okay.
It was, yeah, but it was engineering plus entrepreneurship. It was kind of a 50-50. I still had to do a thesis in terms of my engineering. So I chose machine learning there. But at the end of it, I was fascinated with machine learning. I felt this is going to change how things work. So I ended up doing another master's at École Polytechnique for applied mathematics, but focusing in machine learning, AI, the fundamentals of it. And that took me to Airbus. That was kind of the journey, going out of space and then coming back to space, combining both my machine learning, applied mathematics, but aerospace skills while I was at Airbus.
Well, the machine learning industry is basically caught on fire in the last few years. It would have been really easy to find about 90 different jobs you were qualified for. So why the space one? How did space? You weren't able to fly, so for some people that would have been the end of the road. How did machine learning turn into a career in space?
Yeah, it did take one more turn before I came back to space itself. So at Airbus, for me, when I got the job profile, I met the team. It was, as somebody who was studying aerospace in school, that would have been my dream job. I was into a project where I would work on autonomous flight. So that was pretty crazy. There were two set of projects, one that completely reimagined autopilot systems, like completely based on, AI, genetic algorithms, these kind of things. The other one was more like they gave us a A350 in 2 years time, and then said, okay, put whatever sensor you want to put on it, make it fly completely autonomously without needing any kind of ground support. And that felt even crazier.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy, I had to try. So,
for reference, how big a plane is that? It's not. You're not talking a dining room table UAV. You're talking
no. Full size A350. I think it can take more than close to 200, 250, 300 people.
Oh my gosh! I'm a big sci-fi nerd. That is kind of the beginning of Skynet, right? An autonomous airplane that big. Yeah. How'd it go?
It happened. I think everyone in the team, we were close to 30 people in the team, and everyone thought, this is crazy. How can this happen in 2 years from scratch? We pulled it off. More than every other scenario, like not takeoff, cruise, landing. The most difficult was taxi, because we didn't have a autopilot system for taxi ever. Now, how do I make that completely autonomous?
Right.
So that definitely took more effort.
Okay. Because you're watching the taxiway, you're watching left and right. The tower is controlling who's coming down out of the sky. Yeah, I never really thought about that problem before, but yeah, that's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
30 people in 2 years. Do you have an idea what the budget for that would be? Or is that proprietary to Airbus?
I don't think I can share that. I have very little idea about it, but I think it was proprietary. But it was pretty crazy that we were able to pull it off. Of course, we had numerous test flights. It was very important because we would have I think two test pilots on the plane, and they were flying all the test flights, a designated pilot, and we would have kind of a sprint cycle like any software company. And every end of sprint, we would have a demo day. He
Okay.
would show up at every demo day and he would be like, am I going to be okay at the end of this? That really put things in perspective when he would show up and ask specific questions because it was his life on the line. I mean, he would still anytime take control, but
Yeah,
it's still his life on the line.
yeah, yeah. Wow. And at the end of 2 years, was he pretty comfortable?
I don't know how comfortable he was, but he did fly a flight multiple times. We did have, so he did give a lot of feedback on what kind of input he needs while, so that he's more sure that it's going to do the right thing as a
Right.
next step and not going to completely go crazy. So he did give a lot of feedback into the entire system. But yeah, it flew. We made it. It's a public project. You can look it up. It's called ATOL, ATTOL. So you'll be able to find a lot of news articles on that. So it did pretty good. They are continuing. I think they ended up creating one other project, but by the end of that, almost even before the end of that project, I had the idea for my company, SpaceSense, and I was already working on it, and I was just ready to quit my job and
Right.
start
Right.
working on this.
Good, good, good. Well, that's a great segue into the next piece. So let's talk about Space Sense. You quit a pretty interesting project. So, if you're like, oh, I'm here and I want to like level up, let's go build a space company. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about its origin story. How did you get started? It's about 2 years old. Where are you at? It's actually a little older than that. 3 years old, right?
Yeah, three and a half now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so, what's its origin story and where are you going?
Yeah, at the time I was still working at Airbus. I was at the headquarters of Airbus, if you know, it's in a tiny city in the south of France, really cut off from everything in the world. Uh, it was mostly a chance conversation with my colleague. We were just talking about a company in India that was manufacturing roofing tiles. It was the largest manufacturer of roofing material for the whole country, so it was huge. But they had no idea about what their market was, as in how is the market changing, what kind of roofs are people using in which part of the country, and how is that changing over a period of time.
Wow.
And we being people in space, we are like, don't they know we're up in space agency and NASA just give away satellite data for free?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can imagine using machine learning, it shouldn't be so much effort to just, automatically detect what is the type of roof, even to some extent, even with that free data. And then, and the way they were doing it at the time was they would already pre-select one or two tiny cities and rent a drone and fly it, and somebody's manually going through the drone footage. And I was like, you will never know your market, let alone know a new market.
No.
Uh, yeah, so it
No.
was
I
more of
mean,
that.
do they know how big India is? I mean, one village at a time with a drone that's 1,000 people's lifetimes worth of data.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. So what I did is, so I was just curious, I know it's very easy to throw things, saying, do they not know this possible? Did they not try it? So out of curiosity, I spent a weekend to see, can I do it? Um, can I just create simply a very simple algorithm to look at roofs? And the funniest thing was, I'm trying to label that data and I can't see the house. It's 30-meter data, it's 10-meter resolution data, and I can't even look at it, and because the whole house is smaller than a pixel or just the whole pixel.
Right.
So I can't see it. It's just colors. So okay, I found a way to overlap Google Images and then still annotate my low resolution. Although it was bad resolution, but my algorithm was good enough. It could look at a pixel and say, is there a house under it? If, and then what is the type of roof? It could do that.
Let me just pause for a second. So you're taking public. I'm wearing my NASA shirt here. You're taking public data from NASA and
the European Space Agency this time.
European Space Agency. Okay, all right. So I don't have an ESA shirt. So you take ESA data, but still publicly available. It's mostly free for anyone, and you're layering it with Google Maps. So you can say, the XY, they're at this street at this address, and even though the ESA data isn't high enough resolution to see the house, you still are getting, I'm assuming it's spectrographic analysis, that you're getting a signature back, and it says it's a clay roof, it's a tile roof, it's a tar roof. That's what you're getting?
Exactly. So in this case, I never studied remote sensing. So I used very simple basics, machine learning basics, to extract all the layers. So I'm not even trying to extract any specific features. So I'm just saying, I'm just going to put not just red, green, blue, but the full spectral bands to then try and see. I mean, at the end, it is looking at the spectral signature and being able to decide not just the fact that it is a roof, but what type of roof. So for sure, I can't go to very minute details, but it can already give me a very broad classification, way better than what they are doing so far. And that was over a weekend. And while doing it, I also felt a lot of frustrations in coming from, using simple, ready to use, everything is handed for you computer vision, to this world of remote sensing where nobody speaks the same language. It was like so many things were not there for no reason. There is no real reason why it should be different. So anyway, so that was the beginning of it. And at the end of that, I thought, okay, this is just one company which had nothing to do with space for so many centuries, but they have a use case that could completely change how they operate. And now, is that something that's common across the world? If that is so, why are they not using this technology? What is stopping them from doing this? So it took me a year going around talking to a ton of people and trying to see what could be, and trying 2-3 different approaches of what that solution could be. And this is where my experience at that nonprofit building those stuffs came in.
Yeah, because you want to be able. You said several times you want to see your technology in people's hands and them using it, right? So in this case, you want to get the data out into the world so people could use that. Did you do any business development calls to that roofing company?
We did have multiple calls, follow-ups. It didn't really go much. I guess the cost was too much, and they're not really used to R&D in their company that much. But anyway, it was the beginning of my company, and I ended up speaking to so many people. So I went across insurance, banking, other nonprofits like DareGreatly, people that are actually working on the field, to retail companies like Walmart. I was talking to Walmart in Chile, strong people across the place. And one thing, it keeps coming back, right? So satellite data is not new. Landsat has existed for more than 30 years now, and Airbus has been existing and giving very high resolution for a while now. So is so many other companies. So why are they still not doing? Why do they still not have access to this? And one conversation that really stuck with me and that made me feel I have to do this was the one that I had with DareGreatly. It's a nonprofit organization based in California, but they work across the world. And the conversation I had with the person there, they were at the time trying to, they were in a place in Africa, I don't remember which country, but they had a flood situation there. And the only way they knew where to go give support or help was coming from media. And that for me was insane. It was not acceptable. I mean, you don't even need machine learning at this point. Using SAR data with a
Yeah, push
very
it off.
classical flood map
Right,
is basics. So I was like, this is not acceptable. Why does this entire country not have access to this technology?
right.
And that keeps coming back to the fact that, space has been such a closed industry for so long. And the people that have access to such technology has always been companies with very large checks. So
Yeah.
that has to change. And that has been the reason why I felt I have to start this. I saw few other companies trying to do that, and that was definitely very motivational. But we all still believe no one's figured it out. I still don't think I have figured it out. We're still in the journey of figuring how to democratize this technology, but that's the reason I started the company.
So for I'm going to put words in your mouth. So if you've got the right data, you can solve an awful lot of problems. Is that kind of how you're approaching it? Whether it's floods or roofing, I'm going to guess fire also is part of your portfolio. Wildfires.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not just about the data. As you can imagine, I was looking at the same Landsat, ESA data, same multispectral, but then there are like few hundred use cases to it.
Right.
And the difference, I mean, if I give that data to this Give Directly company or to that roofing company, they wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, NASA data or ESA, I can't literally see anything. I can only say whether it's a forest or not a forest or it's agricultural land. That's the maximum I can do.
Right.
But what's really making the difference and what's changing now is being able to use algorithms to automate insights. So that really brings down the cost, the scalability, and the fact that now because of that combination, this is something I can actually use in my business day to day.
So does that so there's a trade-off these days as the industry is starting to, I don't want to say mature because it's a long ways from being mature, but as the industry is starting to get its legs, so would you argue that you're an AI company, a software algorithms company using space data? You don't have any satellite yet, right?
No, we don't.
Okay. Are you going to have satellites?
At this point, I don't think so. But it would be the only time I can say that I will think about it would be when we see a specific use case that none of the satellite data is able to solve, and it's very important, and we would want to fill it. But otherwise, no.
Okay. Yeah. So you're mostly a data company that is using space resources to solve problems on the ground.
Exactly.
Perfect. Perfect. We've got a question from the audience. Dr. Tompkins is a pretty interesting guy. He's worth looking up if you want to chat with him. He's kind of he calls himself a plant doctor or a plant whisperer. He's really good at growing stuff. But he's asking a question: did you validate and verify with the roofing drone images? Ground truthing can be difficult, especially temporarily. So I guess he wants to go a little bit further with that first use case that you were looking at.
Yeah. We did. We did send it over to the people over there, and they did have drone images. So I wouldn't say it was perfect. It was my first proof of concept, and I think it was about 70% of the time accurate. But it was expected. I was looking at Google Images to annotate for sure. There are a lot of mistakes.
Cool. So let's talk about those were your earliest days. You've grown to a pretty good sized team. Are you all headquartered in Boston, or is it remote?
So the company is set up in France because I was at the time in France, and it's set up in Paris. So I started the company just before COVID, not knowing COVID was going to happen, of course.
Right.
So we, at the time when I started, we were meeting pretty much in person all the time. But then because of COVID, we became a COVID company, pretty much remote. We onboarded all of our employees completely remote. We had a fundraising during COVID. So, and the people that left Paris, no, don't want to come back to Paris. So they are too grown to some space and fresh air. So we said, okay, fine. We were able to work pretty efficiently for 2 years remotely, although meeting as much as possible. So we are continuing to be a hybrid team at the moment.
Yep. Yep. How big are you? What was fundraising during COVID like? How much did you raise? And again, the topic is money and space. So let's dig a little bit into that. How much did you raise? When? What's your runway look like? How many people? And if you want to talk about revenues, that's that's up to you.
Sure. So I have to say one other thing. So we raised all our money in Europe. And that's going to be a very different approach, very different sentiment compared to the US.
Yeah.
I am in touch with a lot of investors here in the US. It's just that, at a very early stage company in Europe, it's very rare to get investments here.
Yeah.
So it takes some time before we scale. But for us, it didn't matter. We were inherently a global company in terms of our operations, our customers. But we started in Paris. So one of the big differences I saw was even as a deep tech pre-seed company, we still had to show certain traction. At least we felt the pressure to. So that also guided some of our decisions very early on. So in terms of what does our MVP look like? And so with a very quick MVP, we raised the first pre-seed round for $500,000 in 2020, mid 2020, quite in the middle of COVID. And yeah, for us, we were quite worried that COVID can affect our business.
Mm-hmm.
So we were quite worried about that. But what happened was it did not. So in terms of customers, we did not see anyone dropping or stopping because of COVID. In fact, it was happening the other way around. More people were inclined to do things more remotely.
Yep.
So it was, so that way it went well. It didn't affect us. And luckily at the time, the investor sentiment was still okay. People didn't stop investing, at least not in early stage. It didn't affect us. So it took us a month to sign a term sheet, agree on a term sheet. So which was completely crazy for us. Especially during COVID. So at the end of it, I have to also tell you, for early stage startups, Europe does, at least France has a lot of grants/loans coming from government related mechanisms, and not just one, but there are multiple mechanisms. So for an early stage startup, it was a huge part of my co-founder's role to look for them and apply for them. Right. So we ended up raising twice of that in another, so about 800,000 in loans and grants from the government.
Fantastic.
And yeah, so that really, really helps. And that did get us our first set of team. But recently we raised we raised a very small bridge from our investors, existing investors, last few months ago, more as a means to, well, again, because of the market, we were looking to raise another round early last year, just around the time the market completely shifted. Okay. So the metrics required to get that round suddenly changed overnight. Yeah. And we felt that even if we keep going at this, we will just keep getting stalled, or we will get really bad deal. Yeah. And we had some pretty good runway, we had more revenues than we expected from some of our early customers. So that way we felt it was a better decision to extend our runway to get to better metrics so that we can have better terms with our fundraising. So we did a very small bridge with our existing investors, and we used our revenue to then extend our runway right now. So we are good to go for until mid next year.
Outstanding. That is a really it takes something special to launch when the world's on fire. I was talking to, I was actually not on this show, but on a different show that we hosted it's about a year ago. And this was a 3-star general that was referring to the earliest days of COVID. And he said it was a lever. It was a multiplier effect. If you went into COVID unhealthy, you tanked. If you went into COVID healthy, you grew. We went from 3 people to 6 people during COVID. So for us, that, we stopped doing the kind of research that we want to be doing, and we wound up doing a lot of stuff like this, right? So, so we made some pretty big choices that fortunately turned out. But to grow during COVID, that's definitely a sign of how nimble y'all are. That was probably easier because you were a software company, not trying to build space qualified hardware. A lot of space companies closed doors during those first maybe 6 months or so. So that was great. And that you have continued to react to the markets. It's crazy how much the markets impact what we're collectively trying to do, this whole sector is trying to do. Because unlike Silicon Valley, hardware companies are really hard to build, right? They're way more expensive. Before the program started, Jyotsna was asking me about my company. I'll tell you just a quick story here. We were trying to raise about $500,000. This is way back in maybe 2004, maybe 2005, something like that. So the world was vastly different. $500,000 in those days would buy you a team of 6 or 7 people, grad students out of Stanford. And at the end of 6 months, if you gave them enough pizza, you'd have a product, right? You'd have a product that you could sell to the world. $500,000 in those days was going to buy you 1 microscope, but nobody to work it, no one to operate it. So we had to borrow university assets just to get stuff to happen. So very different. And so that's why I asked a few minutes ago the question of, are you a software company using space data, or are you a hardware company? All right, so and that probably was the difference of whether or not you could get a bridge loan too, because it extends your runway. All right, so what are your clients like? What kind of what does your business development process look like? What are you trying to serve now? Who are you trying to serve now?
Before jumping into that, I wanted to add one other thing in terms of investments. So although we are a software company, we are still very focused on space assets, and it's still our technology. We're not selling to anybody in space, but we're selling to people who have nothing to do with space. So even that did not make it any easier for us to raise funds, because every time we had somebody on board, they are very happy to follow. They would never want to leave, never. They would just say, I don't understand what you guys do. We would love to have somebody who understands that.
Right.
And, we will, put faith in their due diligence. That's very understandable. But it needs to be better. It cannot be that, because whether it's here or in Europe, that leaves us with very, very few number of investors. And that's really bad for business at the end of the day, in terms of what companies get funded, what kind of deals they get. That's really bad.
It's terrible. So I could name, I'm not going to, but I could name probably the five biggest, best. Sorry, let me say that differently. They're not the biggest. They're actually pretty small. I could name the 5 or 6 significant space VC groups in the United States. I can only name one that bridges North America and Europe. But they don't have large funds. One of them is trying to raise $75 million. They're one of the oldest. Most of them are in the 5 to 15 million range. They're super smart folks. Those folks know this industry inside and out, and they tend to want to be lead investors. But there's 1,000 companies that will follow, but there's very few, because there's 1,000 companies in Silicon Valley that have space as part of their portfolio. They don't specialize in it. They don't know it the way some of those other organizations do. And I would say in Europe, it's probably an even thinner community, a smaller community.
It is, and then it's not, kind of, because what the governments have done there is they allocated certain funds for investment in space.
Okay.
They don't do it themselves. What they do is they have a dedicated private fund to then together create a separate fund. So it's still a private fund that's then focusing on space, and they do give some locals, the National Space Agency, as part of that support. But even then, it's still very tricky. It still leaves us per country maybe 1 or 2 investors that can do that, and I cannot have an investor from a different country because of the funds are coming from their country. You see?
Right.
So.
Because national sovereignty plays a role in this game.
Yeah, but there is a way to get around that. So people have done it. You open an office in that.
You set up an office in iSpace. iSpace has an office in Japan. That's officially their headquarters. An awful lot of iSpace stuff happens, I think, in Colorado, Luxembourg, and they have a European office also, a different, more than Luxembourg. So yeah, that's how everybody's doing it. Is they'll have satellite offices that focus on that local market.
Yeah.
Is that your plan? Is that what you're doing in Boston?
No. My Boston was mainly for business development, and also for investors a little bit on this side, because we are a space company, but our challenges are nothing to do with space. Yeah. Our challenges are more to do with the platforms, the go-to-market. Again, very much related to software. So we are definitely very focused in solving those challenges. And I believe that if we are able to solve them and have more traction, money can come from different avenues. So that's hopefully that works, but we'll see. But one of the good things that European Space Agency is doing in this front, it's understandable that there are not many companies that want to invest because they don't understand. So European Space Agency very recently created an office that dedicates a few people in their team to do just this. They can help do due diligence for these private funds. Okay. That's all their job. I don't know how much they do it, how effective it is, but at least they created something.
Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to look into that. That's a group out of ESA that's doing that?
Yes. ESA has a different department called ESA Commercial. In that department, they have a small group that does just that.
I'll look that up. I have a note there. Okay, well, so then you were able to use the capital that got you started, and then a bridge loan. But you said something else in there really important, where you said, our revenues plus that gives us a year's worth of runway. So,
Yeah.
who are your clients? What problems are you solving for them? Say what you're willing to say about income streams.
Sure. So to jump into who are our customers, I want to give a little bit context on what I intended to do and what was the path I took. So my intention has been from the beginning to say, how do I democratize this technology? How do I make it so simple that I don't need to be an expert to leverage it, to be able to use it, whether it's for my community, in my country, in my region, in my county, or for my company. So whatever it is, it should be so simple that I don't need to have remote sensing PhDs and graduates working. There are far fewer of them compared to even machine learning engineers. So it's even worse. That has been a goal. But our biggest question was, how much of it do we need to build, and from where can my customer take over themselves? Because I can't. So we were looking at where to start in terms of industry. Agriculture seemed like a very good avenue to start with, because I didn't have to convince them that they need to use satellite data. They really wanted to. Some of the very big players had already invested few hundreds of millions or even a billion sometimes to get this capability. And a lot of the medium size and a lot of the large players that were lagging were very eager to get a piece of it themselves. So we started in agriculture, and we focused mainly on small to medium-sized companies, because we wanted to work very closely and focus more on learning from our user.
Wait. When you say small to medium-sized companies, give me a size, how big is that farm?
So the biggest company, they do few hundreds of millions of revenue. The company, the farms, the one they do manage few tens of millions of farms every day, but the ones they register with us maybe would be like 40% of that. So still a few millions.
Okay.
Yep. So we started with them, and even this was even before we did our first fundraising. So we already had a bit of traction with some of the startups in that space, and luckily they grew really well. So that really helped us get our first fundraising. For them, the goal was they knew they had to use remote sensing, so that is Earth observation technology, to do the same thing which they do manually, but in a scalable way. How can we scale efficiently was what this technology was solving for them. And that's what we helped them. We had to translate the language of what I see from my data to what they need to understand for their industry. And once we did that, it was very quick for them to take it and integrate it into their products and use it across the board. And we then replicated it with few other companies in agriculture. That set us our MVP. That was something very quick, didn't use any machine learning, but it gave a very scalable, completely automated, hassle-free experience of integrating Earth observation into a daily product.
Okay. And do you sell that on a kind of site license basis, or here's a folder, here's what we know about this day in this place?
So it's a simple, in this was an MVP, so it was very focused on a couple of use cases. So it was very straightforward. So you integrate this API, you take a subscription based on how much area you want to cover. And every time there's a new update to the image, it will get automatically updated in your user interface.
Cool.
So it was, and one of the things we were super proud of was the API we gave with the documentation. It was so simple for them. Like, we offered to do onboarding. They're like, no, we're good. We got it.
Okay.
Yeah, that felt really good. It was very simple for them to start creating it, and a couple of weeks they were testing, and in a month or so it was in production. So,
and that was before you went out for investor capital. So you had that client in place?
I had a couple of clients in place that were already integrating.
Okay.
So we already had a few thousands, maybe close to 10,000 hectares
Okay.
So 20,000 acres about of that from them already registered on our platform. We already signed a year-long contract with them, few tens of thousands. It was very small, but then they kept increasing their tier every few months. Like they didn't expect to use it as much as they
Right.
ended up using it.
Great.
Yeah, it was pretty great that way. So, but then it was a very narrow application to the larger vision. So at the end of actually beginning of last year, we started asking ourselves, okay, we got this done. We are good. We understood very closely. We work with them. So we do understand this knowledge gap. We understand that. We understand they are not going to have any remote sensing engineers. So we understand how to, what do we need to do so that their data scientist will know how to take it from there.
Right.
So we understand that. Now, how do I go from here to something that has a larger scope? Because this was very narrow application. So again, we were in a very deep market research mode, not just in agriculture, but going beyond agriculture. And that led us to the current version of our solution, where as a data scientist, anybody can just go get access to a few of the public data sets and as well as private, some of them, and quickly have all the steps to create a machine learning solution. Doesn't even have to be machine learning. Even if it's a non-machine learning data-driven solution, it takes a few minutes to get it up and running, to then quickly experiment. And I don't need to be a remote sensing expert. So one of the really good examples, something I'm at least we are super proud of with our solution. We had a company which was just starting off, just two founders in the company and an intern. And they reached out to us saying, we believe remote Earth observation data, satellite data, is going to be a very key part of the product we are building.
Okay.
And they wanted us to help them get started. So it took us a bit of a workshop or two to help them know what they should be working at, what they should leave for later.
Right.
Gave them a few examples to share. And with one data scientist and some examples we shared, they went from an idea to a working pilot ready MVP product in 4 or 5 weeks. And that's
Wow.
for me is super crazy. And they were working on something more complex. They were working on sustainable sourcing.
Okay.
So yeah,
Wow.
that has been the journey. It definitely, I think, in terms of revenue, it is a challenge to scale because of our business model. So our business model is quite simple. You pay for what you use. So
Yeah.
it scales like a platform as a service subscription, unlike most of the current existing companies in Earth observation where they want to do a very large project upfront. So we kind of took the other approach to make it more accessible.
Terrific. That's kind of amazing. We only have just a few minutes left. Uh, what does 2023, 24, and 25 look like?
So for us, really refining the go-to-market, that's our biggest challenge at the moment, because we are trying to make it much more accessible, make it very easy to then translate how and where this could be used within the companies. So that for us, that's our full focus. That's our only focus at the moment, to add more number of customers, make it. We have a free version of our platform, by the way, for data scientists, and I would want to see a few hundreds of projects built on top of it for their local requirements, local climate solutions. And that is where the full focus is. For between 23, 24, 25, what's changing is we are expanding what kind of use cases, what kind of solutions we can help build compared to where we are right now. And that improves both in terms of machine learning advancements, AI advancements, at the same time, what kind of imagery we support.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time for joining us on our show here. I'll let you know, probably this version will be up in maybe, call it 2 weeks or so.
Mhm.
And I'm free later in the week if you wanna set up another conversation just one-on-one. I'd love to keep this
Yeah,
conversation.
that'd be great. I'll write to you. We'll find some time.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much, y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.